Hello, and welcome to another Aperture Speaks video. It's after Easter, and it is still winter outside. So there's sort of weird things that are happening in the world. Today's episode is called Praying. That may sound a bit strange. We are not really going to go down a religious theme. It's just the name I've given this. So, really what it was is I was at Easter. In Poland, it's actually quite a religious festival. And my parents came to stay, and my wife and I took them to Częstochowa. Częstochowa in Poland is a central place for pilgrimage that happens every year. It's also the location of where there's a painting of the Black Madonna and Child that you can see in the church. And every year, I also believe that when students, just before they take their high school exams or college exams, they go on a pilgrimage there with the school to pray and say, please can I have good marks. So it is quite a a sort of religious place, and we went there obviously to show my parents. My parents are quite interested, and I had been there before. I'd photographed everything really before. It's nice to go back there and photograph new things. Today was a lot more sunnier than the last time I'd been there, and we went in the basilica. And actually, in most places in this, it's really a monastery. You can take photographs. You cannot take photographs in the museum sections, but in the church sections you can, as long as you don't use flash photography. And it actually has a big sign saying no flash photography. The thing is, this is actually a working monastery. In the basilica, which is the bit of the church you can see now, there are services that do happen. There are the masses, and then if you go into this next bit, which I'm not quite sure what it's actually called, but it's where the painting is, and the painting sits behind the altar. The painting is usually covered up with cloth. You can't see it you can see it, but only at specific times in the day. And in here, there's a big sign that says no flash. And really, what I was sort of thinking about when I was there and I was taking some photos, is it okay for me to take photos here? I was maybe not is it okay, am I allowed to, but is it okay, maybe ethically, to take photographs? Because there are people stand and they are praying in the church, and you want to have a nice picture of the central aisle with the altars, with the light coming through, like I have got, and you sort of start asking the question, well, where should I stand? Do I stand right in the middle? And it's another one of those things where you can't just get out a tripod, because it'd be fantastic in this place to knock the ISO right down to 100, have an f11 lens, f11, maybe f22, give real good depth of field, get all that sort of shininess on the marble. It'd be fantastic. But then again, you'd have to have a tripod to sit that on, and now you have to sit in the middle of the aisle. And when you're talking about quite a few longer exposures. I know I was shooting at 400 ISO. I think I generally kept within maybe 18 to 50. But maybe between, it was my super wide, 18. I say super wide, say wide, but 18 millimeters to 50 millimeter lens, and I don't know, it's around about 3.3, 3.5. That was my f-stop. So when you got really shallow depth of field. But it meant you could take pictures, without too much camera shake. Obviously, it was quite hard, but it was still really bright, which was actually quite nice in this particular church. So I actually came when I taken this particular image, and there was this. I sat down in the pew because I was waiting for my mum and my wife were in the other part of the church, and my dad and I had already moved on, and I was sat in the pew just sort of waiting, and I saw this quite nice image that you're sort of seeing now. And this guy was really in a sort of a silhouette. You could probably make out quite a few details. And because he's standing his back to the main source of light, and I'm sat in quite a dark place as well. The light is coming from above, and it's coming from the right. That's how the light's actually coming in. It's not coming from the front, and it's not coming from the back. At the front there is a large window, but there's a building in front of it, and at the back there's no real window. There's a huge organ. And I was sort of I put the camera down on the pew, and I sort of knew what the scene would look like, and I was sort of taking pictures. And the guy did look at me, but I think he was just generally looking around. I don't think he realized I was actually taking a picture of him. And it really, afterwards, I sort of took it. I was like, well, should I not just delete this? I'm the sort of person who doesn't like to delete stuff once I've actually taken it. So I was really sort of thinking about, should I delete it? Is it right for me to take a picture? Because he was standing there, and he was looking. I think he was actually looking towards one of the altars for the saints, and I was really then sort of thinking, well, should I really be, doing this now? Is this the right time? And it sort of got me thinking about, what do you do in a church when you want to take photographs? Churches are, for me, quite interesting places to take photographs, especially Catholic churches or Roman Orthodox churches, which are hugely engraved in gold and marble and silver, and they have these statues, and the statues are really pop with detail. And I was like, right, I've really got to think about what is it, sorry, you really have to think about the light and everything. So, but then you also think about what is it that I'm doing that could offend somebody. Because if you're sort of taking pictures and you do this sort of beeping sometimes, I noticed that actually when I was I maybe became more conscious afterwards, because I did go back into the other part of the church where there was a mass was about to start, so they had removed the cover for the painting, and there was a lot of people there with cameras, and I could hear the beep. I generally don't like beeping on my camera. I prefer just the silent, and you can hear the shutters go click, or so the SLR goes, and I don't mind that too much because it's slightly quieter sound. There was this beeping, and although a lot of people turn off their flashes because there is a sign there that says no flash, there were, you could hear the beeping all the time, and I was sort of wondering, well, if I was in the church, a lot of people do travel quite a long way to get here. Like they come here for their mass. Is it right for us to be taking these pictures? My wife has always said to me that as a rule I should never take pictures during a mass, and if the church is having a mass, not to go in. And I sort of agree with that, so I usually try and pop in before or after. And they usually have the time masses outside, so you can see if you're going to be interfering or not. And then it's sort of thinking, well, you're going to get people. Whenever you take a picture in the church, you're going to have people in the picture. And it's really quite then like, well, you have the thing about consent. Did this person consent? And that's why if you've actually darkened him, so this man is more in a silhouette shadow. Because I think, for me, that's what really is the most important. That there is a little bit of his privacy is kept because I have done that. But then I was sort of thinking about myself, would I want it? Let's say it's not this church, but any church, and you've gone there because you're in a moment of crisis or you need a moment of contemplation, and then you got somebody walking around going click, 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 or beep, 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 and would it be annoying? And I think sort of yes. So there's sort of an etiquette when you take pictures in churches. I generally never use flash in churches because I know that the flash on the frescoes can sort of deteriorate the frescoes a little bit. And of course, over time, if you have a lot of people doing it, you do sort of destroy the frescoes and stuff like that. Also, a flash is really distracting, especially if people are sat there. Obviously, you have to move quietly. You can't really set up tripods. I think the only time I've ever used a tripod in a church was when I actually was doing a project, and I had permission from the churches to go in. And I was actually given the keys to the church so I could go in by myself when there was nobody there. And that was quite nice, to be able to do that. So you could have those long exposures I was talking about earlier. But otherwise, you can't really take a tripod into a church and set it up. But there are places you can't do it. So I was really having some problems thinking about that. So yeah, it sort of sat on my mind. I'm not quite sure what the right thing to do is in those situations. Is it to not take the picture because you're there, or is it to take the picture and but do it in such a way that it doesn't interfere? And I would probably go with the second option. A lot of these places, they are tourist attractions, and people do go there because of the history of the place. This is it was a fortification as well as being a monastery, and it is where the Polish kings took a last stand against the Swedish invasion. So there's a lot of history in this place. It's also the location of the Black Madonna. It was also the place where when Pope John Paul II came, because he was Polish. He came here and he gave a big talk, and there was a huge crowd from the trade who were linked to this trade union movement, Solidarity, which began the process of removing communism. So there is a lot of historical significance, and of course you have the yearly pilgrimage, and there's a huge pilgrimage when it happens. It's on TV in Poland. You can watch that the last day of that pilgrimage on TV. And I've known people who've actually gone on and walked from where I live, which is in the center of Poland, to where this place is. And it's about 170, 180 kilometers away. So it's not a short stroll down the road. So yeah, it is actually quite a interesting site. For the image itself, I processed it as my 3 exposure as a HDR, mainly because I wanted the contrast and the detail in the background. I then took the middle exposure, the minus exposure, and then masked in the man in the foreground, and then I processed the image in color effects. But in color effects, I wasn't planning on doing any color changing. It was more to the contrast. So I just ticked off some things. I had a preset for this particular church for the colors and the lighting that I can then just tweak. I then converted it to black and white. I used the black and white adjustment layer. I then added a dodge and burn layer so I could just darken some areas. I mainly wanted to darken the pillars and line the walls just to bring some sort of patterned contrast in. I then added a curves layer and for my own sort of tweak, I always like to have some black and white images just a little bit warm. So there's like a hint of that, just because it just made the image like just bringing those details a little bit more. And that's really where the image is. I'm actually thankful I did take it, because I think it's quite a nice image, because you do have this sort of switch between the contemplation of this guy and then all this detail around him, and it does look, for me, quite a nice image, and I am quite happy with it. I hope he didn't mind. I hope he didn't realize that I took a photo, but there we are. It does happen. So that's really the end of the video. Just to mention, obviously, I do have a Twitter account, and I also have my blog account. And my blog is aperture64.wordpress.com, and I post on there nearly daily. I have my Twitter account, which is @aperture64, if you want to follow me, and I have my Facebook as well, my Facebook page, aperture64. Obviously, you see the spelling there as well. I usually post my videos on Tuesdays, like today. Sometimes it's Wednesday or Thursday, depending on what's going on in my life. And I hope you can pop over to my blog, follow me on Twitter, and like me on Facebook. And I will definitely see you next week. Until then, bye-bye.